Welcome to Talkin' Jets. My name's Ryan. I'll be your pilot tonight. I am joined alongside my lovely co-pilot, Mr. Dom C. The season's finally over. Dom, how you doing today?
Oh, you said it best. The season's finally over. It's a great day. It's a very, very low key Black Monday, though, right? Not a lot of moving and shaking. It's probably the
No,
first time in a while, right?
we've got what? We're the only GM spot open right now, and
Correct.
I'm pretty sure there's only what, 5 head coaching openings.
Well, I mean, New England kind of jumped the gun and got rid of their guy before Black Monday, and Peterson got canned today. And I think there's a couple off of that. I just read that
Saints.
Gus Bradley was let go as a defense coordinator in for the Colts. The guy from Cincinnati, defensive coordinator, was fired. The offense coordinator from Seattle was fired. So not much action. Very, very low key. Surprising.
Kind of nice. I'm excited to get into it. We're going to go over all the GM candidates, all the head coach candidates, give you guys some of our thoughts. We're going to go into the official Tankathon draft leaderboard and whatnot. I call it a leaderboard, but it's just the draft order. We have the 7th pick, thanks to the Lions winning last night versus the Vikings. So
Yep.
very happy with the way that turned out. I guess before we jump into all of that, real quick, concise feeling maybe about the season or just thoughts overall.
Happy it's over. I'm not gonna lie. Hate to say that, but it's the truth. Like, this was probably one of the more difficult and frustrating seasons that I can remember being invested in as a fan. So I'm happy it's over. I'm ready to turn the page and put 2024 and the mess that what it was behind us. It's exciting times in the fact that we're get to go through yet again a new regime change, new head coach, new coordinators, new GM, different views, different ideas. So that part's exciting. But all in all, it was nice that, there were some certain good surprises that came out of the season. And they're very few, few and far between. But I think I was very pleased with the way that Olufashinu kind of stepped in and really took over and took the reins and held his own for a rookie on the left side. So I think that we have a nice piece there. I really liked the way John Simpson played, and I really liked the way he took a kind of a leadership role in the locker room. So that was really positive on the offensive side. Yeah, defensive side, it was nice to see Will McDonald kind of, do what we thought he was drafted to do, and that was get at the quarterback. I think he finished with 11 sacks.
I think so,
Um, n-
yeah.
yeah, nice season. And that's about it. Leonard Taylor, I think, has some promise to be a rotational piece. That's always a nice find. You get him as a UDFA. He earned some minutes and he got a lot of reps, a lot more than I expected. That's for sure.
Yeah. The league's going to look a little different. This Jets team's going to look a little different as far as like season being over. Very happy to be done. That was a very stressful season,
Yeah.
just from like all the hopes. You get Aaron Rodgers back, you think you're going to get what you lost a year ago, and then just everything between the locker room and the coaching staff and the GM and everyone getting canned and whatnot. Very frustrating. I agree with you. I think Olu and Will McDonald were the 2 key points for me that were super highlighted. John Simpson, very nice addition to the offensive line, to the point where we only are looking for our right tackle going into the offseason, whether that's retaining Morgan Moses for a year or bringing in outside help via the draft or free agency.
Or
So,
or
or
moving AVT over to right tackle. That's what I would
that
like
is
to do.
true. AVT over
That's
to
what
right
I
tackle.
that's what I would like to do. But I digress. That's for another show, another day.
We've discussed that a little bit on this show, you and I have, because
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
cap number that AVT is going to have. It might just be a little bit easier to find a guard than it is a tackle. But then we get into this whole discussion of moving people around the offensive line. And, I know people don't necessarily love that, but I think in a pinch, you're all right doing it if you needed to.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, let's just jump right into the draft side of things first and foremost. Like I said, Jets own the 7th overall pick. Patriots wind up winning, drop from 1 down to 4. So the final top, I guess, in front of the Jets, you got the Titans, the Browns, the Giants, the Patriots, the Jaguars, the Raiders, and then the Jets sitting at 7. As far as who they think, who Tankathon thinks is going to be the top picks in this draft, Sanders 1 going to Tennessee, Cameron Ward going to the Browns, which is interesting because I'm pretty sure I heard earlier today or yesterday that the Titans actually like Cam Ward, or the rumor is that they like Cam Ward a little bit more right now.
Correct. So that is something that has been buzzing around the draft circles that I'm tied in with, and some of these guys who are more tuned in with the teams and the agents and whatnot, that Tennessee is absolutely smitten with Cam Ward. Now, it could be, it's the start of smoke season, so they could just be dropping. They could have their sights set on Shedeur Sanders. They could have their sights set on trading out for all we know, and they're just putting stuff out there. But yes, the rumor is that they are more so on Cam Ward than Shedeur Sanders. So it would make it interesting. If Cam Ward went 1, it would make number 2 very interesting, because you can argue that Cleveland, they're not going to pick at 2 very often. You might as well just go get your future quarterback, because Deshaun Watson, coming off an Achilles, had a setback, so they don't even know if he's going to be ready for training camp. That contract is going to be on the roster, but it doesn't preclude them from taking a quarterback and maybe even playing that quarterback, or at least having him on the roster for when you can, cut ties with Deshaun Watson. I just wonder if Daddy Dion will step in and say, "Nah, you're not going to that franchise." You know what I mean?
That's exactly what I was thinking. It didn't feel like the Browns would necessarily be like on the top of Dion's list. I'm sure they were hoping for the Giants or the Raiders or someone along those lines. So maybe there's a situation where they trade out of that spot. I agree. I think the Watson injury and lingering injury and the fact that they're so high in the draft might compel them to take a quarterback this year. I think now that Watson does have the leg injury, though, they might just think like, well, we're going to stink next year, without the quarterback position kind of figured out. So maybe they run it back, for another stinky year. But we'll see where that goes. Giants obviously sitting at number 3, kind of stings after having that top 2 pick for the last few weeks. They're mocked Travis Hunter. I could totally see that, but I think they would be the key player in any type of trade scenario to go up and get the quarterback they want. Tetaroa McMillan, the wide receiver out of Arizona, going to the Patriots. I think that makes a ton of sense. I really don't want to see him go there because that's actually the player I would prefer the Jets wind up with.
So I just want to touch on that real quick. I don't see the Patriots going that route this early. I just think, they need another weapon and so on and so forth, but I think that there's other needs that are going to be of paramount importance, like the offensive line, for one. That to me, that's a good, that Cleveland and New England are 2 big, trade up spots, in my opinion. If there's a team that is dead set on either Ted McMillan or one of these defensive players, whether it's Carter or Graham or Hunter, even if he falls, I think that could be an opportunity for them to trade out and get more assets, because arguably, New England has a bottom 3 roster, top to bottom. They need to protect Drake May. Their tackles just aren't going to cut it. And I don't know, maybe you sit at 4 and just take the best tackle. I think it's a little rich. I would definitely see them taking the conservative, slow route and really building this thing from the lines out. So I don't think Ted McMillan's going to be there. As a matter of fact, I put out a, shameless plug. I put out a mock draft this morning on my channel, and I had Ted McMillan falling to us at 7.
Did we take him?
That was my selection. Yes.
There's my boy. All right, I like it. I'm a big fan of McMillan. I love the size. I think it would be a nice compliment to Garrett. I don't think Devontae's ultimately going to hang around. I think there's a chance. Do you think there's any chance Rodgers comes back where it could throw a little bit of a wrench in this, or you think he's like
I would
done?
say it's like 95% that he's not going to be a Jet next year. Now, whether he
Mhm,
plays or not, I'm not. I would lean he retires. I would
mhm.
lean that he retires. But if he doesn't, I think it's very, very safe to say it's probably a very slim chance that he's back with the Jets. And I think, like you said, if he's gone, I don't think Devontae's going to be here.
Mhm. Maybe they just make the quick jump over to the Giants for a season. They're
Yeah,
going to be
could
looking for
be
guys. It's
maybe.
not totally out of the realm of possibility. Um,
Listen, it could be. Maybe it's Tennessee. Maybe it's
mhm,
Cleveland. They need some quarterback help in both of those spots. Um,
mhm,
and a lot of the feedback that I'm getting on my video from those from every team is we're not going to be in the quarterback race this year. We're going to find ourselves a 1 or 2 year bridge quarterback, so on and so forth. Blah 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 blah. So you never know. I mean, there's teams that if they miss out or if they're just not sold on this quarterback class, which a lot of people aren't, they that a bridge quarterback makes sense. Now, would Rodgers go to Cleveland? Probably not. I would assume. Excuse me. Would he go to Tennessee? I think so. He's got a home in Tennessee, so
mhm.
that could be a place. And that's an interesting one to say the least.
Do you think he'd want to go there given how poorly they performed this year? Like, I feel like he still would be in like, I mean, he might be at the detriment of whatever team actually wants him. There may not be a championship caliber team like the Jets were, 2 years ago that would
Mm-hmm.
want to go out and bring in an Aaron Rodgers, especially the way it sort of went down this year. I think he may get some sort of like Belichickian esque sort of feedback, I guess, where it's like, hey, you got to go to college. Like maybe
Yeah.
it's better that you hang it up. And you're no longer one of the guys in the NFL. I mean, we'll see where that kind of goes. We got Mason Graham, a fan favorite interior defensive lineman, going to the Jaguars. Will Johnson going to the Raiders, and they have the Jets penciled in for Abdul Carter right now, the edge rusher out of Penn State. Lots of stuff is going to change: Combine, Senior Bowl, Shrine Bowl, and obviously who declares, who doesn't declare could
Yeah.
very much shift how all this plays out. There's some rumors that LR, if he has a good playoff run through the college football playoffs, maybe he decides to declare if they think his stock's going to go up enough. He had already said he was going back to school. So maybe, I guess before we go too far, Jets sitting at 7. Give me your top 3 of who you'd prefer the Jets to get in that spot if they were available.
I think I think it's Abdul Carter, Tet
Mhm.
McMillan, and I'm going to throw a wild card in there. Um, Maybe a guy like Emeka Buka or Luther Burden, who are arguably the second best wide receiver. I think that especially if Adams goes, it's going to be a position of absolute need. Listen, we
Mhm.
don't know what Malachi Corley is. He clearly didn't win this coaching staff over, didn't get a chance.
Mhm.
Maybe it was just our coaches didn't know how to use him or develop him, even though they traded up to go get him.
Mhm.
But banking on him and Garrett as your top 2 receivers next year, because again, assuming Devontae and Lazard both leave, you're gonna need some body. You're gonna need some bodies. Now, this class isn't the greatest in terms of wide receiver depth. So for me, I'd like to get my hands on one of those 3 guys. And they're 3
Mhm.
different skill sets. Tet McMillan is, we talked about it. He's that big body, big, strong hands, catch radius. Kind of he can do a little bit of everything. He can play big slot. He can play out on the boundary as the X, possession type guy. Really, really good with the ball in his hands for a big guy. Red zone threat, 50-50 ball kind of player. And then you have Luther Burden, the third out of Missouri, who is much more, very similar in skill set to Garrett Wilson. So some will say, yeah, he's too similar to Garrett. He's only 5'11", 200 pounds, but I mean, the guy is electric. Like, he's got that, jitterbug feel, can play inside and outside. I would love to see him, he's like a slot fade merchant,
Mhm.
in and out of his breaks, like super, super agile and super super short area quickness. Like I love that type of receiver.
Mm.
And then Emeka Buka, who is probably the most crisp and pristine route runner in the class. He's going to be more of a slot guy. He understands football very, very well. He knows how to find soft spots in his zone. He's going to be a quarterback's best friend type.
Mm.
He's probably more Robin to a Batman. I don't know if he'll ever really have wide receiver one upside, but if we do the right thing and we lock Garrett up long term, he doesn't need to be wide receiver one. He can be a very, very good complement. So, yeah, Abdul Carter, and then the two, and then one of those three wide receivers would be my top four choices.
Mm.
If we stick and pick at 7.
Yeah, I think for me, my top pick's going to be McMillan. For all the same reasons you just said right there. I'm not comfortable going into next season with Garrett and Malachi Corley as our top 2 receivers, and then Gibson, would be third at that point. That doesn't make me feel very good. Lazard and Devontae going to be gone. And again, the Jets may not pay Garrett this offseason, which does still, leave that up for concern moving forward. And hopefully that's, it's not an issue, but at least having someone there. And not to mention, if you're going to give, let's say, a Justin Fields or a Tyrod Taylor or a Jordan Travis or Jameis Winston or whatever quarterback you plug in for the Jets next year, they're going to need weapons. And then at the very least, if you're going to take a quarterback in 2026, you're locked, stocked, and loaded at the weapon position to then, have some nice growth from a young signal caller. My next player, I really think we need defensive line help on the other side. Mason Graham is kind of the guy I think a lot of people have penciled in. I see a lot of scouting reports have him listed as the 3 technique. He does seem to be a little bit more of a run stopper than maybe I think people that are reading that description might think. I think he's got 30 stops this past year, which is a pretty solid number. I think him next to Quinnen Williams is a nice compliment. And then you got JJ and Will McDonald on the outside. Now, I will preface that with, depending on how JJ is really feeling, how confident they are, what type of defensive scheme are we going into? Is there a situation where one of JJ or Will McDonald or Abdul Carter could be envisioned as a linebacker in this defense next year? Then I think Abdul Carter raises up a little bit higher than a Mason Graham. I think the guy's a stud. Those would be the 3 players that I'm kind of locked in on. If we get any one of those 3, I think I'd be really happy.
Yeah, listen, Mason Graham's a good player. I'm not gonna deny that. I think I think a little bit differently than you. I think his best attributes are really how he can affect the passer from that 3 technique, and we already have a player very similar in Quinnen Williams. Could they play next to each other on the defensive line? Sure. Would it be the best situation? Probably not, I would say, because one of them is going to be forced to kind of play out of position and play that one tech and ask to eat blockers and clog up the holes, and which is neither of their true strong points. They're both more penetrating type defensive linemen. On top of that, I think it's a very deep interior defensive line draft. So I don't know if you need to spend high capital, especially top 10 capital in this class to land somebody. I think you'll be more than comfortable getting somebody in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th round.
Now, what are your thoughts on the offensive line real quick before we move into the GM and the head coaching stuff going on? I know that it looks like Will Campbell, Kelvin Banks are the top 2 tackles, at least per tankathon. And then I'll just pull up the full big board order for what they got. Josh Simmons, not even going to try and pronounce the Minnesota.
Ariante Ursary.
That's not as bad as I thought. Ariante. Yeah. That's actually exactly how it looks.
Yeah, it's very phonetical. So I'll tell you about this class, Ryan, is that I think Campbell is head and shoulders the best lineman in the class. I think Campbell is also a guard. In my scouting and in my guide, I have him listed as an interior guy. I don't think he's going to play tackle at the next level. Very similar. He's a big guy. He's got a really good anchor. He's built to be a power gap style guard. Struggled a lot at times with some speed. Just not the quickest to those in those pass sets and those 45s. On top of that, he's going to have those T-Rex arms. So, some teams won't even have him on the board as a tackle.
Mm.
Very similar in the, very similar in, kind of scheme fit as an AVT, like we just talked about, probably better guard, but can pop out and play tackle. And really, I think that along the line of all these guys, I don't think there's not that many pure tackles in this class, truth be told. Kelvin Banks is my highest rated tackle, and there's a lot of prognosticators, a lot of people that I'm close with in the draft world that think that he might be best suited inside, at least to start. Josh Simmons is probably the best pure tackle, and he's coming off of a complete a tear in his knee week 3 this season. So, a big question mark there. I love Wyatt Milam out of West Virginia. I think technically he's as technically sound as an offensive lineman as you'll find. Limited athletic upside. Again, another guy with short arms, another guy I think is going to probably be best suited inside. So the tackle class is very weak. And if I'm the Jets, I'm hoping that I bring in a staff here that doesn't need to take another top 12 pick on an offensive lineman. We can't be the only team in the NFL that doesn't take day 2 and day 3 picks on the offensive line and can't develop them. We have to figure out a way to do that.
Now, speaking of our staffs, there's some names that have popped up. GM list, head coaching list. I've marked them down as far as offensive-minded staff, defensive-minded staff, and then obviously where the GMs are all from. Let's start with the GM list. Are there names on this list that came out that really speak to you? I can tell you right now, I would say my top 2 I would say top 3 or 4 are going to be towards the top of this list that I have written down. What are your thoughts on the list overall, Dom?
Listen, there's some guys in here, just full disclosure that I'm just not very familiar with. Like, I don't know Trey Brown and his background. I'm not very familiar with Ray Farmer and his background either. I know that if I had my druthers, I want somebody that has more of a scouting background or a personnel background. So that tends to me, I lean towards the Borgonzis and the Jim Nagy's of the world. Like Jim Nagy, I think I think he's a really, really good guy. I know him personally. I think he's a really, really good guy. I think he's got the makeup of an NFL GM, and on top of all the connections that he has, I think that plays into it. Now, I know he's probably a long shot on this list. I know that Borgonzi and Greenberg are going to be the 2 guys that everyone talks about the most. Greenberg being the hometown guy. I think he's from New York originally.
Yep,
I know he's more of a business slash, comes from the business aspect of it, more of a cap guy, so on and so forth. So you bring somebody in like him, you're going to have some veteran personnel and college and pro personnel guys in his staff, which I'm sure that he would bring in. So I have a little bias. I'm really hoping and rooting for Jim Nagy to get a shot here. Outside of that, I think Borgonzi is the way I'd go.
So I'm going to highlight the 3 names that I really like. You hit on all of them.
Yeah.
I like Nagy. Obviously, his connection to the Senior Bowl, I feel like is so important from a scouting perspective. Just having that tie in with every single team, with every single college, with all these different players.
Single agent, with every single agent.
Yes, connections is a massive part of this whole thing. Phil Savage used to run the Senior Bowl. Now, obviously, our interim GM, or maybe I guess not so much our interim GM anymore. Now that we're done. I would say as far as let's color code these. Let's go green, orange, and red. So as far as guys that I would mark in red, I don't particularly want either Trey Brown or Ray Farmer, and I'll tell you why. Trey Brown, still just a little green for me. Ray Farmer, on the other hand, he was part of the Chiefs before the Chiefs got good. He was part of the Browns before the Browns got good. Then he went to the Rams. The Rams were already good. That maybe he had some kind of impact on drafting Puka or something like that. Maybe there's more behind the scenes that we just are not privileged to. Those are the 2 that I'd probably write off immediately. Hey, you know what? I'd probably even throw John Robinson in that. I don't particularly.
Yeah, I don't think John Robinson is. That's been played out.
Yeah.
So I agree. I'd probably mark those three as red as my least favorite. And again, full disclosure, just because I don't know anything much about Farmer or Brown, so
Mm.
I'm not going to
So
consider them.
So Ryan Grigson is a name that became a little bit more popular today because we are interviewing Josh McCown and both Brian Flores for our head coaching position. Grigson is the Vikings VP of Player Personnel. He was the former GM of the Colts from 2012 to 2016. A lot of people do not like him because the offensive line in front of Andrew Luck was not taken care of. He traded a first-round pick for what's his face? The running back from the Browns. What the hell was his name?
Oh yeah, the kid from Alabama, Richardson.
Trent Richardson. There it is. So
Yeah.
not ideal. Now I will say this for the people that don't like him because of the offensive line issues or woes that he had. Minnesota's got a pretty decent offensive line. I would say the Jets have 4 of the 5 pieces kind of figured out, so it's a little less critical here. But if you want him for the long term, obviously you want some type of pipeline in there. I'm going to put him down as like an. I guess I'd put the rest of these guys down as orange in my book. Louis Riddick is kind of one of those dart throws that you have, a non. I don't want to say a non-football guy, but he hasn't really been around like NFL front offices.
Yeah,
in quite some time.
I mean, he cut his teeth as a scout, so there's that. But the whole thing with Riddick is it's weird to me because he's been very, very critical of the Jets and the team and the organization and so on and so forth.
Yes.
And now he wants to come in and kind of lead the show. So to me, there's a red flag there. Dimitrov, I'm glad you put him in green because I think that one isn't of all the retreads. I think that one might be the most interesting.
I agree.
As well, he did some really nice things in Atlanta. Didn't have, if we're speaking honestly, he didn't have the best drafts when he was there. Like, didn't have, made a huge deal. Like he's a feast or famine kind of guy. He is, he made a big move to get Julio Jones back in the day. I think he was also part of the organization when they drafted Matt Ryan.
Yep.
But he had a lot of misses,
Trade up for Julio. There's lots of. I think at least his experience is interesting to me. Alex Halaby, he has an analytics background. I don't know if I necessarily want that as the GM. I like having that guy like in a front office in general. But probably should rearrange this after the show and have all my orange guys in the middle, all my red guys at the bottom there. I'm full on with everything you just mentioned up there. I just want to acknowledge Jimmy Jets gifting 5 Talkin' Jets memberships. Thank you so much. J-E-T-S, Jets. Thank you so much, Jimmy, for doing that. Hennessy Heisman, Ethan, I'm No Seagull, Taylor, and J-Mull all getting gifted memberships courtesy of Jimmy Jets. Boys and girls, make sure you drop those JETS in the chat to let us know you're enjoying the stream and you want to see more of Dom and myself. Then JV comes in and he just says he's an idiot.
Don't see that. Don't be so hard on yourself, JV Free.
We like you, JV. You can hang out. All right. So now that we've kind of gone over a little bit of the GM list overall, I do agree. Borgonzi, Greenberg would be the 2 dreams for me. I think. I guess you almost want to draw lines with which head coach might link up with each GM, and I feel like that's part of the puzzle with all of this because we haven't heard any thoughts of Liam Cohen as a Jets interviewee. Same with
Cliff Kingsbury.
Cliff Kingsbury. Now, Kingsbury's an interesting situation because he's under contract from the Cardinals until 2027. So he's getting paid $7.5 million a year to be an offensive coordinator right now. So he may just not want to interview, overall, and would just sit back and be like, hey, I'll just coach Jaden Daniels, less responsibility, all the pay that I could ask for, unless he winds up in a perfect situation. So as much as I do actually like Cliff, I don't think he's going to be an option for our Jets. As far as the head coaching list, we heard Mike Vrabel not possibly taking the Jets job because the job opens up with the Titans and or sorry, not with the Titans, with the Patriots. Once Florida or once words are hard right now. Once Mayo got released yesterday, what are your thoughts on Vrabel, where he could potentially go at this point? Do you think we still have a shot at him? And then who would be your top guys that you would, hope to get?
So I think the chances that us landing Vrabel are pretty slim. I always thought so. Not because the New England um spot opened up. I just thought that, it realistically he's the cream of the crop in this coaching cycle. So he's going to get his pick of the litter. And I just think that there's teams and situations that are going to be better suited for the the cream of the crop in the coaching cycle to choose from. Listen, we can read through the tea leaves. The Patriots deciding to move on from the guy who was handpicked from the owner after year one. He did that with an understanding that, there's going to be someone there that's going to take the job. So don't be surprised if Vrabel or Ben Johnson end up in New England. And Ben Johnson's not on this list. Ben Johnson had made it known that he's not interested in the Jets job, so they didn't even request it. He made that known. That was always going to be a pipe dream. But on Vrabel, like, I'm not all that upset that he moves on and if he goes on elsewhere. He wasn't my first option, even when before the New England job came about. So there's that. I just don't know if I don't know how much he used us to open up other spots or whatnot. Take all that aside, I just don't necessarily think that he was going to be the interest was mutual, if you get what I'm saying.
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, when we kind of take a look back at what positions are actually open right now for head coaching positions, you got the Bears, you got the Saints, you got the Jaguars, the Jets, the Patriots. It's only those 5 right now.
Right now, yep.
When we start to like move pieces around, like, do you think there's any playoff teams that might move on from a head coach if they get bounced from the playoffs? Whether it's one and done or anything.
So an interest now, move on as in fired. I don't know. Could there be coaches that decide to move on? I think there's a couple teams that are interested. One that's not a playoff team, and that's Dallas. McCarthy's contract is up. They have a 15-day period, I think, which starts Wednesday.
An exclusive
where they
negotiated window.
Exclusive negotiated window, exactly, where McCarthy could decide to move on. So Dallas, I think, could move on. I don't see I'm not gonna say I don't see a way it happens, but I would be more inclined to think that McCarthy does move on, and because you work through a lame duck situation and don't have that support from your front office. My guess is that he might be looking for other opportunities. So I think that job could open. The other interesting one, and this might be out of left field, but this is just something some whispers and some rumors that I heard. I heard Todd Bowles might be done by choice.
Really? Yeah. Interesting.
So
you think maybe, Liam Cohen stays there? Then?
I think that's a fair possibility. Through our group chat, like, I love Liam Cohen. I would love the I'd love that idea. I lean towards the offensive side of the ball more so than any of these defensive choices. And you are missing one on the offensive. Oh no, he's there. Never mind. Josh McCown. I see him. Yeah. So
there's so many names flying around today. I was like, I'm gonna miss someone on here. I tried to make a spreadsheet trying to figure everything out.
Yeah. So I know that they haven't requested Liam Cohen. He would still be probably my top choice. After that, I love the idea of Joe Brady, and giving him the opportunity to kind of take charge. I think he's earned that right. I know the Jets have had interest in him in the past. If Borgonzi gets the job, I think you can tie in Matt Nagy to that opportunity, and people are really kind of mediocre or blah on Nagy, but reality is that he has a winning record. He did he got what he could out of a quarterback that ended up not being too good there when when they drafted him. In what's the kid? He's the Buffalo backup now.
Trubisky.
I can't. Trubisky,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Is he
Um,
still in Buffalo? I don't know if he's even there anymore. He was with the
he
Steelers
was
for a little
hurt.
bit.
He was in Buffalo. I think he got hurt this year, and he's been on IR, and that's why they brought in Mike White. Um, so that I wouldn't be, it doesn't like set the room on fire, but I wouldn't be too upset about it because I like the idea of you know, the, uh, the connection between Borgonzi and Nagy. Outside of that, like I want nothing to do with Arthur Smith.
Mhm.
Um, Brian Greasy is an interesting one. I mean, it's outside of the box.
Mhm.
Slowick is as well, and Slowick I think is probably a year or two away from really developing. Now, people are going to say, "Oh, Houston's offense, took a tumble this year." Yeah, they weren't that great. They were decimated with injuries up front and at the wide receiver position. So, there is some of that. The thing I like about Slowick is that he is experienced on both sides of the ball. He cut his teeth as a defensive coach before switching over to the offensive side of the coach. So he's very, very well rounded. His personality, from what I understand, is a little quirky. So who knows how he'll fit in New York media. But yeah, I mean, to me, I'd lean on the offensive side of the ball, and on this list, like Joe Brady would be of this list. Joe Brady would be the guy that I would hone in on as my choice.
I think I do like Joe Brady. I had him as an OC option a few years back. Um, Interesting that like you see Ken Dorsey leave, and then all of a sudden Joe Brady, gets an MVP caliber season out of Josh Allen. Not that Josh Allen wasn't going to do that necessarily, on his own anyway, but I do think there's something there. Obviously, had an electric offense with LSU when he had Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. Had some good success with the wide receivers down in New Orleans when he was the wide receiver coach and offensive assistant, passing game
Yep.
coordinator, something along
Yep.
those lines.
Passing game coordinator, exactly.
How do you grapple with how he performed in Carolina? I would also throw Josh McCown into that same sort of realm as well. Their lack of success there, does that give you any pause for concern?
You know what? I don't know what happened in Carolina. I know that Matt Rule was there, and they cut ties with Joe Brady real quick. I don't know if that was kind of a scapegoat thing, like Matt Rule trying to save his own job and making some changes, just like the Jets did with Mike LaFleur, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mike LaFleur ended up being the scapegoat for a bad season or a bad situation. Whether or not he deserved to be fired, that's arguable. Whether or not Joe Brady deserved to be fired there, I don't know. But you look at what he's done you look at what he's done before that, and then you look at what he's done on the rebound. In being the QB coach in Buffalo, and then taking the offensive coordinator spot up there. Listen, I know they have Josh Allen, and that's kind of a cheat code in a sense, but he's also got the first 1,000-yard rusher in Buffalo in how many years? He's done it with a wide receiver crew that is void of any big names, right? They got rid of Diggs. Yeah, they traded for Cooper, but he barely played for Buffalo. Keon Coleman was okay. The other receiver there, he's skipping my mind. The little slot guy, he had a great season. I just like the way that the adjustments that he makes. It looks like Joe Brady's offense is always zigging when you're ready to zag. I love the power concepts that he brings in his running game. I like the guys that want to really, and Ben Johnson and Liam Cohen and Joe Brady, they all kind of have the same mantra. They're very innovative, they're very creative, but their bare bones is they want to run the ball, and they figure out schemes and ways to run the ball effectively, and they've all shown that they can do that.
Yeah, and Cook's little brother up in Buffalo having himself a hell of a year from a touchdown perspective. I feel like it's been year in and year out that Buffalo just can't figure out the running game, and as soon as Joe Brady comes in, they figure it out.
Yep.
The Jets could use a little bit of that. We've got some really good running backs in our stable, and you just can't quite seem to like get it all clicking. I don't know if some of that is an Aaron Rodgers effect or just the overall offense that we were running in general. But I tend to agree. I do want to go offensive-minded head coach. Liam Cohen's the one I would like to see on here. admittedly, Vrabel and Flores, two of the top of my list. I think it gets really interesting when you start talking about Flores and maybe the idea of bringing in 𝐂𝐿. And would that pairing provide any type of potential for trading for someone like a JJ McCarthy, or maybe they want to move on from JJ and they're like, we're not going to pay Sam a bunch of money. He turned into a pumpkin. Not that I think Sam's coming back here, but just like, what do you think that pairing, 𝐂𝐿 coming back, Flores coming back to the AFC East, how do you feel about like a former head coach being our head coach? I know a lot of the stuff the Jets have kind of put out there seem like they're going to value that type of experience first and foremost.
Yeah, if I had to go on the defensive side of the ball, like Flores would be the one that I want. And that doesn't, that comes with, some really, scary situations of temperament because, he hasn't really been able, like his teams were very disciplined. They were the least penalized teams in the league, so on and so forth. But they're also in the bottom third in overall DVOA offense for his time there. For me, and maybe this is just personal, but like I can't take another, game managing type of offense, race to 20, play tough defense and shut them down. Like we went through that with the Rex years. We went through that with, the Solly years. Like I'm over it, man. I'm over it. Give me something, a mind that can lead this organization in the 21st century and score some points and still put up a good defense as well. Like it doesn't have to be one or the other. And I think, if history kind of, and the analytics show these defensive minded coaches, that tends to be the, theme. Really, really tough, stout defenses, which is great. But then, like just game managing this, just the race to 20 mindset is just something that I can't handle for another how many years.
Now, how much of that with Flores do you think comes from the style of quarterback that Tua was, him coming out of Alabama with a hip injury? He wanted Justin Herbert, who's very much not that type of quarterback in my like sort of mind's eye of him. Do you think had he had Herbert, it still would have been as defensive focused, or do you think something changes with the style of quarterback that he wants? Because I think for me, Flores identifying Herbert as the better of the two quarterbacks, which I guess is kind of debatable depending on how the explosive offense that Miami had versus maybe where the Chargers have kind of been the last few years. I really like Herbert, and if we can identify the quarterback, that does mean a lot to me.
Well, he also, in his short tenure as Dolphins head coach, he also ran through offensive coordinators. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So it wasn't necessarily just a quarterback thing. And if my memory serves me right, it wasn't even Herbert that he wanted. It was Jordan Love that he wanted in that draft class.
I don't. Oh, maybe. I definitely remember hearing Herbert. Love early would have been nuts. Or maybe he was thinking second round. What? Love went late first, didn't he?
Late first, yep.
20 something?
Yep, 27, 28, something like that.
So real quick before we move on, I see Mike. Thank you so much for the super chat. It says your message was retracted, so I can't show it on the screen. Oh, wait, here's the other one. Hold on. I'll get it. Bam. He says Mike Borgonzi and 𝐂𝐿 would be interesting. So if you could get forget relationships and whatnot as far as the players and GMs, or I shouldn't say players, the head coaches and the GMs on these lists, pick your top two. Do you think they work together, or like what's your dream pairing?
I don't know, man.
Borgonzi,
tough question.
I would say I feel like one of the top two. Borgonzi and Greenberg are like the two guys. If you get me Mike Greenberg and Liam Cohen, I'd probably sign up for that right now.
Yeah, that would be like, or even, I know we didn't request them, but like Spytek and Liam Cohen. Spytek, who's the AGM in Tampa Bay, more of the draft guy, more of the, personnel background. You get those guys with Liam Cohen, that's fine. You get, Borgonzi or Greenberg with a young, up and coming offensive mind, like a Brady or a Slowick. I don't know much about Greasy, so I can't really talk to him. That's an interesting one, I think.
He's under Shanahan out in San Francisco. So
and I'm wondering if
or 22.
That's more of a, I just wonder if Josh McCown and Brian Griese, because neither of them really have held coordinator roles in the NFL. I wonder if those are interviews to try to, get
Prop
information
them
to
up.
see if maybe they'd
Ooh.
be offensive coordinator
Mhm.
candidates for one of these guys.
I could totally see that, especially if they're looking at a defensive head coach like a
Yeah.
Brian Flores to start. I think alternatively, if you go with someone like a Joe Brady or a Bobby Slowick, you might be looking for a defensive minded former head coach. So you might be looking
Yep.
for someone like a Rex Ryan, like a Vance Joseph, potentially like a
Now,
Ron
let's not talk
Rivera as
about
well.
Rex.
I know I
Let's
don't want to go down the Rex rabbit hole. I'm over it, but he's on the
yeah.
list. He's interviewing tomorrow. Fans like him. I think I would prefer us not to even go after him in the defensive coordinator perspective
Yeah.
at all. But when
Yeah.
you think veteran defensive, prowess at one point, there, I don't know. I feel like if you could have Rex as like the rah-rah cheerleader, that's like what I'd prefer, and him not touching the X's and the O's at all. And obviously you can't do that. But is there a defensive-minded guy that you would want to pair with one of these offensive-minded guys that you see on the list? Like,
Well, I
is
think
there a pairing?
Flores and McCown make sense because they have some some cohesion from being in Minnesota together.
Mhm.
I'd be, like I said, I don't know if you're going to get like Matt Nagy, Joe Brady, and Bobby Selk are all OCs right now. So you're not going to bring them over to be an OC for one of these defensive minded head coaches, right? Um, and just on the flip side of that, if you made Nagy or Brady or Arthur Smith or Slowick your head coach, you're not going to bring in Flores or Glenn as your defensive coordinator, or Vance Joseph for that matter as your defense coordinator. You could bring in Ron Rivera as a veteran former head coach to run the defense for one of these young and upcoming offensive minds. I don't know how it works on the flip side though, outside of McCown or Griese.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like you'd probably need to have like the assistant head coach, moniker tied to like a Vance Joseph or Ron Rivera or something like that.
Yeah. Well, Ron
Maybe
Rivera's
not.
out of the league, so you don't need to
Yeah,
do
sure.
anything with that. Yeah.
Hex comes in, says, how good of an offensive coordinator could McCown be? When he was with the Jets, he wasn't that good at quarterback. So maybe there's something, maybe there is something I'm missing. So the value for me with McCown is obviously getting some head coaching nods. The head coaching interview with the Texans was during a time where the Texans weren't really a desirable location, so there's probably a little asterisk there. He's been on so many different teams. The wealth of knowledge that he has on how other organizations run, I think, is something you can't just brush off. He was on 14 teams or whatever over the course of his career in the NFL, not even including coaching and whatnot.
Yeah, and they say I mean, I know that 𝐃𝐨 is a really good head coach and former quarterback himself, but they're paying a really big pound of respect towards Josh McCown and the work that he's done with Sam Darnold this year to really get him past the hump. Now, let's see what it equals out to, because he looked like the old Sam Darnold yesterday, right?
Mm-hmm. Do you
Aaron
think
Glenn
that
blitzed
makes
the
it
shit out
less
of him.
likely there's any like potential JJ McCarthy talks in the future, seeing Sam kind of fold
I
a
never
little bit
thought
versus
that
the Lions?
Yeah, I never thought that JJ McCarthy being traded was a real possibility anyway, if I'm
It's
being honest.
it's a pipe dream, right? Like when
Yeah.
you're ranking like the quarterback potential options in your head, realistically, we're probably just
So
punting on
here's
its
a
growth.
question for you, Rye.
Oh, okay, shoot,
Say we go with one of these offensive minded guys and
sure,
pick your poison. Say take Joe Brady.
okay.
Okay. Would you consider bringing Ulbrich back as the defensive coordinator? Now, would Ulbrich come back as the defense coordinator? I don't know.
He
He was the
might.
interim head
I don't
coach.
think so. I like
No?
as much as I like Brick, I think the whole interim head coach thing has kind of like soured him on me, and I feel like just getting a whole clean slate overall. Like I don't think there's anyone I really want to keep from this regime. Maybe you argue Boyer as a special teams coordinator or something like that, just because he's been through 4 regime changes already.
Yeah.
But even then, I think washing our hands clean of everything. The one defensive name that keeps coming up for Jet fans is Aaron Glenn, and man, this guy just like exudes confidence. I just don't know what offensive coordinator you're going to pair with him that makes me feel like comfortable. That's the part that sort of scares me. John Morton was a name that Michael Nania threw out there as former Jet offensive coordinator, has ties with Aaron Glenn. If you could convince me Aaron Glenn is the leader of men and John Morton is the guy that's probably never going to get a head coaching role, but was probably our most productive offensive coordinator when we had Josh McCown at quarterback and Robbie Anderson was our top weapon, and we were actually throwing the ball around. Like, I thought that was the last time we actually had like some semblance of a good offense. What would you think of that kind of pairing?
I just don't know, man. I don't know if I can get behind another
Defensive.
rookie defensive-minded defensive coordinator. And I know you'd say the same thing. Like I'm all for rookie offensive coordinators coming in, but at least that mindset is different. That the concept that build is different. Yeah, I just don't know. I loved Aaron Glenn as a player. And I'm, me with bated breath. I'm got my fingers crossed that the hype and the rumors that he is stocked,
Saints.
and yeah, and going to the Saints. I hope that comes to fruition. If I'm being honest.
I feel like if we're playing the match game, it's Ben Johnson or Vrabel to the Patriots. The interesting thing is if Ben Johnson decides to take the Patriots job, I think in that sort of scenario, Vrabel may become the Jets head coach. I think if Ben Johnson doesn't want to take the Patriots job, he may opt to stay in Detroit an additional year and kind of wait, unless he wants to go down to Jacksonville. Obviously you got the connection with Aaron Glenn to the Saints. We've heard rumors of Pete Carroll just being infatuated with the Bears job. Do they end up going that direction? Do they want to bring someone else in? It's going to be fascinating, especially if the Dallas job does open up, like you say. That's going to be a very intriguing spot for, I think, a lot of potential guys. I'm a little surprised the Raiders position didn't open up. I kind of thought there was a chance Pierce might be out.
Yeah, historically, I mean, I think they're still paying McDaniels.
That doesn't surprise me.
So, on a team that is historically cash poor, I can't see them paying two coaches that are not there to take on a third. So that might just be a financial decision. Especially where they're picking now, you're probably not going to be in the market for one of these quarterbacks unless you sell the farm to get up there. So, maybe they just figure that they'll just ride it out with another year of AP. And then next year, if they're bad again and they're in the quarterback class looks better, then they can move on and start fresh there.
Got KF coming in, says Flores is tops. He wanted Herbert and he knew Tua was trash. He's no nonsense, no Rex. Which one of the GMs have a history with Flores? So the history part is going to be that Ryan Grigson, just because they're both currently in Minnesota right now. Flores is the one that, like, they were tops in like not committing penalties while he was down in Miami. That was just a massive problem for us. Like if you think of offense, defense, special teams, that fourth aspect of the game is the hidden yardage that penalties create and take away from you, the opportunities it takes and gives away from you. I feel like that's such a massive part. If you can correct that, the Jets we lost what, like 7 1-possession games or something like that. Like that might be enough to flip that record around in and of itself. And then if you can get a good offensive coordinator in here, like a Josh McCown, I don't even say like a Josh McCown. We don't know if he's called plays, in some of his other stops, but you just sort of trust maybe he can be the guy. As far as like Flores matched up with any one of these other GMs, maybe a Louis Riddick, just kind of coming out from not being in the NFL might make some kind of sense. Nagy maybe, with his, Senior Bowl background, not necessarily tied to a particular individual. Outside of that, I don't know if there's anyone else that I see kind of.
Dimitroff liked he's the one who hired Dan, what's
Quinn.
his face? Dan Quinn. So, seems to maybe have a penchant to go to the defense side, I think. But who came after Quinn? Was it 𝐶 Was he the head coach there after Quinn?
Was this the second stint with Raheem Morris down in Atlanta? Was he interim head coach first?
He was. Let's see.
I don't remember
Atlanta
who was after Dan Quinn.
head coaches NFL. Let's see. I'll tell you right now.
Yeah.
The history of Atlanta head coaches. Courtesy of Wikipedia.
Good old Wikipedia.
So let's see. Dan Quinn, 2015 to 2020. Then Raheem Morris was the interim, and then Arthur Smith, and then back to Raheem Morris. So Mike Smith was there before Dan Quinn. I don't know if he precluded Dimitroff or not. I'm not sure when Dimitroff got the job there, but he was there for 7 years.
2008, I think.
So that's when Mike Smith got the job. So he had Mike Smith, who was a defensive-minded coordinator. I didn't realize he had such a good record, right? 66-46 in the NFL.
You hit on Matt Ryan, especially in a division that's like, I mean, I guess they had Breeze in that division for a long time. You had Cam Newton in that division for a long time. So it wasn't an easy division by any stretch.
Yeah. So he had a defensive coordinator, a defensive-minded guy, moved it to Raheem Morris, and the interim spot was the defensive-minded guy, and then flipped it to Arthur Smith, who, was Arthur Smith. Not very exciting.
Yeah, no, he's like very much not enthusiastic for me. Like, I feel like if you bring him in, okay, so let's do this exercise before we get out of here at the 9 o'clock hour. We'll be going over to my channel. I'll do a call in. I want to hear from you guys in the chat what you think of the different options, GM, head coach, all that good stuff. Quarterback-wise, can you link a quarterback with any of these particular coaches that are lined up or GM candidates? Like Arthur Smith being in Pittsburgh, I think you can draw some parallels to maybe Justin
Russ
Fields,
Wilson,
depending on
Justin
how
Fields.
he fields.
Yeah.
Yep.
No.
No,
I can't. I realistically, I mean, I have no idea. Like, you want to say some of these Minnesota guys, the Titans, Sam Darnold, but Sam Darnold's not coming back here. We're not ready to pay that either. Like, listen, the question I would ask is which one of these coaches
can find us one.
can get the most out of Tyrod Taylor, who's under contract as your bridge. That's what I would be.
I don't know if I want to hire a coach based on like how much they can get out of Tyrod Taylor. I feel like I'd want him to be the guy that can go find us a quarterback or get the most.
Or has about develop a quarterback, which is something that we can't do. Yeah, so
a lot of potential hurdles as we go through this whole thing. So much on the table. I do like that the Jets are casting what seems to be a very wide net. I think also when you fire off this many like invites, it feels less painful when you miss on certain guys. I do think that we have a lot of strong pieces here that there will be GMs, there will be other guys coming out. I think there'll be some excitement. We'll get some excitement here.
Yeah.
So Dom, any
excited
last
for
words?
Well, listen, I'm excited for this show moving forward as we kind of really get back to the meat and potatoes of what it was built around and start talking about the draft, because now it's go time, man. Season's over. It's time to get familiar with some of these prospects and how they're going to fit. And, obviously how their fit will be dependent on who's calling the shots and who the coordinators or the head coaches are. But I'm excited to get back to my roots here on talking Jets draft and talking draft for you, Ryan.
Hell yeah. I'm excited. We'll go through, I don't know if we'll go through but like a round by round kind of thing. I feel like almost like a position group, pick, whatever we think, and then we'll make like a list of what we deem as the top list for quarterbacks, for edge rushers, for linebackers, for whatever that we should like kind of keep an eye on. And maybe we, drill down as far as like, okay, we don't think we're taking a linebacker in the first round. So maybe it's like, skewed a certain way that way. But boys and girls, if you enjoy this show, make sure you hit that like button so people that are tuning in after the show at least know this is a worthwhile show to tune into. And I'll be over on the Jets Talk 24/7 channel in just a few minutes. So thank you all for hanging out. This is Ryan, Talking Jets, signing off. Jets!
Jets! Jets! Jets!